There we go. There we go.
No.
Today, we are living in the age of information. And that means that at any given moment, you have at your fingertips more information and more data than at any other point in history. This also means that any topic, even the seemingly mundane, can be easily researched to remarkable depths with just a few keystrokes and clicks of a button. I've found that researching these boring and mundane things has led me to broadening my perspective more often than researching things that I'm already interested in or that I already know a lot about. And tonight I'd like to share with you one of these topics that I've spent the last few days researching, the mule. Mules are kind of sort of a staple of our culture. You know them alongside other equine icons such as horses and donkeys. But if you're like me, you probably never stop to think about them. And in this speech, I'd like to just give a sort of brief overview of what mules are, why mules were used, what were they preferred for, and some of the history of the mule. Starting off with what a mule is, from the Encyclopedia Britannica, a mule is simply the cross between a male donkey and a female horse. This creates a hybrid animal which is unfortunately sterile. It's unfortunate that it's sterile because back in the day that's a pretty big disadvantage especially for a draft animal. You want to be able to get more animals from your animal. But despite the fact that they are sterile, mules have been a staple of human civilization ever since people started keeping both donkeys and horses. This must mean that there are certain advantages that the mule holds that surpass the trade-off that comes with having a sterile working animal. I'd like to get into some of those advantages to start off now. Because mules have advantages over donkeys and horses, and it's not just one or two, it's a long list. And I won't even get into all of them tonight. First of all, since they share traits of both donkeys and horses, mules, in terms of size, fall in between the two. And donkeys are great and all, but they're a little bit on the small side, so they can't get as much done as a similarly sized horse. Beefing them up into the size of a mule solves a lot of those problems. They can carry more and they can work harder than a donkey can. From the donkey side of things, mules have harder hooves and smaller hooves than horses do. This makes them both more nimble and less prone to injury and foot disease, which are both things that are great. The nimbleness is very handy for a pack animal, and the resistance to injury and disease is really useful both for pack animals and as draft animals. And that's all from the history of mules written by Babb on the Mule Museum website. Ensinger, in her 1990 book, Horses and Horsemanship, also notes that mules are more intelligent than horses, and this has manifested itself as two main benefits. One, they're less likely to injure themselves from spooking. She actually notes that horses, when they're in like a low room, if their ears or head touch the ceiling, they tend to throw their head back and they can injure themselves that way, whereas a mule will just duck their head. So they're more suited to being kept and working indoors than horses are. This also means that their more intelligence means they're less likely to spook, which makes them safer to be around and broadens the places that they can be used. Cubitt notes in her article, Feeding Donkeys, that donkeys and mules eat less food than horses do. This is obviously a benefit. You want to, minimize the costs of keeping an animal that's really there to work and to create capital. For you eco-friendly people out there, mules are also more eco-friendly in that they produce fewer greenhouse gases per kilogram than a similarly sized horse would. That's from Aganga and Letzo's 2000 paper, Feeding Donkeys. Mules are also noted for their enhanced performance versus both horses and donkeys. Arnold notes in his 2008 article, The Worker That Can't Get No Respect, that in 1880, a team of mules was saddled with 200 pounds each, and then over the course of just 3 days covered more than 280 miles. That is a remarkable feat. He also notes that in the times of westward expansion, wagon trains towed by mules could cover up to 30 miles in a day, while similar trains towed by oxen or horses would average only 5. And that brings a little bit into sort of the history of the mule and how the mule has been valued throughout history. One of the first known references to it is by the Hittite people, one of the earliest horse peoples, and they valued mules 3 times more than even their finest horses. And moving further into the future in the 3rd millennium, Sumerian texts denote the mule as the royal beast, or the riding animal for princes. And so mules have really sort of been highly regarded throughout almost all of the past, and it's only recently that horses have sort of stolen the equine spotlight. They're certainly more popular in today's media. And I hope that I change your perspective a little bit on mules, because they sort of get a bad rap. They're just regarded as stubborn and lazy, and really they're far anything from it. This speech was intended as just sort of a brief overview of some of the positive traits and attributes of the mule, as well as some of its historical contributions and just a little bit more about it in general. Sort of meant to give you a new perspective on this remarkable animal. Mules have been a part of human civilization ever since humans had domesticated both donkeys and horses, and they have played a critical role in a great many civilizations. All of these things should be taken into account when evaluating one's conception of the humble mule. Thank you, and have a good night.
That was good.